Okay, so let's try to understand OpenAI function calling in this video. So function calling is this idea is that your AI model can intelligently decide when and which function it should call. So it's not like that model is actually executing those functions. It's just that model is deciding when and what function you should execute. So based on that check, you can then call that function. So right here I have this nextjs 14 project, and what you can do is you can write some of the text over here. You could think of this text as a journal entry. Okay, so in the text box I have basically written this message, right? I'm feeling amazing. I just learned about OpenAI function calling. Really excited about all of the AI stuff. Now when I click on the send button, what it will do is it will suggest me some of the actionable insights that I could do, some of the actionable tasks that I could do based on my journal entry. And this is what it's suggesting me, that I could continue learning about OpenAI function calling. I could explore AI technologies and applications, stay updated with latest developments in AI, consider joining online communities or forums related to AI, experiments with implementing AI concepts in projects, things like that. So this is pretty much the application. Now let's have a look at the code of this particular application. So we have this our client component, and in the client component we are actually doing two important things. First is that we are initializing Supabase, and we are basically setting all of the generals that user has created, and so that we can show that when the page loads. So this is one of the things that I'm doing. So if you do not know what Supabase is essentially a backend as a service, and I am currently using Supabase to store the data that I get from the user. Okay. So this is one thing that I'm doing, basically fetching all of the journals and rendering them on the page. And the second thing we are doing is that we are actually getting the text that user has written in the text box, and we are sending that text to the backend API. Okay. In the backend, and then in the backend, we basically get this journal entry and we make a request to OpenAI chat completions API. And this is where the important stuff happens. So what I'm doing here is that I am basically sending a body to this chat completions API. And this body contains some of the important properties that we need to understand. Now, the first property is related to model, like which model do we want to use? And obviously you want to use a model that supports function calling. In my case, I'm using GPT 3.5 Turbo 0613. This is one of the model that supports function calling. And then we are passing the message. In the messages array, I am only passing a single object with a role of user. And then the content is that please identify some of the actionable steps the user could take from this journal entry and store them in a database. Now this message is really, really important. If you are not being specific enough, and if you are not telling exactly what your AI should be doing, it won't do that. So that is really important. And then we are also passing these functions. So it is our way of telling OpenAI that these are all of the functions available. For example, one of the function is available is store general points. And what this function does is that it stores the actionable steps from the journal entry in a database, right? So we are actually telling OpenAI that this is one of the function available, and these are the parameters that it accepts. In this case, the parameters that it accepts is going to be in a type of array, and this array is going to have multiple elements of type string. And obviously this journal points argument is required. And finally, we are also passing this function called auto. So what we are essentially telling OpenAI that you decide like when and what function you should call. You could be more explicit about this. You can actually say which function to call, and then OpenAI will only call that function. But I'm setting this to auto because I want AI to decide like which function it should call. Then we are making this request. We are getting the data. And then we are checking if the model wants to call a function. If the model wants to call a function, we get the function name. We get all of the arguments that we have to pass in the function. And then we do this check that if the function is store general points, then we call that function, right? So this is where it happens. So this idea is called function calling. So it's not like that the OpenAI or your AI model is actually executing that function, that whatever you sent to OpenAI. It's just that the model is telling you that now this is the time you should call that function. And these are the arguments that you need. So I'm handling over them to you. So that is why we are basically getting all of the arguments which we have described over above. And then we are calling function by passing all of the arguments. And then this function basically stores all of the general points in the database, right? So this is function calling in OpenAI. And you could use this to build pretty powerful applications, like whatever you need. That's all about this video. I'll catch you in the next one.